The coffee was cold by the time I heard the knock. I'd been up since 5, the way I always am, old habit from 3 years working trauma response at the county hospital. You don't sleep past 5 when you've spent years conditioning your body to move the second you hear a sound. So when the knock came at 7:45 on a Saturday morning, I was already dressed, already on my second cup, already watching the frost melt off the back fence. I knew who it was before I opened the door. My brother had a specific kind of knock. 3 hard raps, like he was announcing himself to a room full of people who should already be paying attention. I opened the door, and there he was. My brother, standing on the porch of what used to be our mother's house, the house I had been living in and maintaining for the past 2 years since she passed. Standing next to him was his wife, holding a manila envelope against her chest like it was something precious. "We need to talk," my brother said, already walking past me into the kitchen. I didn't move out of the doorway. "Good morning to you too." He either didn't hear me or didn't care. He pulled out a chair at the kitchen table, the one that had always been our mother's chair, and sat down in it without asking. His wife stayed near the door, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sit down, Rachel," he said. I was 31 years old. I had a nursing license, a commendation from the hospital board, and a lease agreement that had been renewed twice on this property. I did not need my older brother to tell me to sit down in my own kitchen. I sat down anyway, because I wanted to hear what he had to say. He slid the envelope across the table. Mom wanted the house sold, the money split between both of us. I had a lawyer draw up the paperwork. I looked at the envelope. I did not touch it. Mom never said anything like that to me. She said it to me. When? Before she got sick. I let that sit in the air for a moment. My mother had been sick for 8 months before she died. I was the one who took her to her appointments. I was the one who filled her prescriptions, who slept on the couch in her hospital room during her last week, who held her hand when she couldn't remember my name anymore. My brother had visited 4 times in 8 months. I counted because I couldn't help it, because every time he didn't show up, I felt the weight of it like something pressing on my sternum. "There's a will," I said. "Mom left a will. The house goes to me." "That will is outdated," he said. "She changed her mind. She would have told me. She told me." He pointed at the envelope. "It's all in there. All you have to do is sign." I looked at his wife. She was looking at the floor. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. My brother's jaw tightened. He had a way of doing that when he didn't get what he wanted immediately, a kind of slow pressurizing, like a valve being turned. "Rachel, be reasonable. You can't afford to keep this place on a nurse's salary. The property taxes alone, I've been paying the property taxes. For now, but the roof needs replacing. The foundation has a crack in the east corner. I know about the foundation. I hired someone to look at it last spring. It's cosmetic." He stopped, recalibrated. "The point is, this house is a burden. Selling it is the smart move. You'd walk away with enough money to put a down payment on something smaller, something that actually makes sense for someone your age living alone." I noticed the way he said "someone your age living alone," like it was a diagnosis. "I'd like to see the documentation," I said. "Whatever you have that shows Mom changed her wishes." He gestured at the envelope again. "It's all in there." "Then you won't mind if I take it to my own attorney before I sign anything?" The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence. The kind that tells you everything you needed to know about whether the other person expected you to actually read what they handed you. His wife shifted her weight near the door. "I'm going to need that back," my brother said finally. "My lawyer needs the original." "Then your lawyer can make me a copy." He stood up from the chair. He was taller than me by almost a foot, and he'd always known it, always used space the way some people use volume. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm asking to read a document before I sign it. That's not hard, that's just sense." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he picked up the envelope and walked to the door. His wife followed him without a word. He stopped at the threshold and turned back. 2 weeks, he said. "Then I'm taking this to probate." They left. I stood in the kitchen listening to their car back out of the driveway. Then I picked up my phone and called my friend Dana, who had gone to law school before she decided she liked landscaping better, and I asked her who she'd recommend for estate disputes. She gave me a name. I called first thing Monday morning. My attorney's name was Patricia Okafor. She had an office downtown above a dry cleaner, bookshelves that went floor to ceiling, and a way of listening that made you feel like every word you said was being filed away somewhere important. I told her everything. The visit. The envelope. What my brother had said about my mother changing her wishes. She asked me to bring my copy of the will and every piece of documentation I had about the property. I brought everything. She reviewed it for 4 days. On Friday afternoon, she called me and asked me to come in. The will is clear, she told me when I sat down across from her desk. Your mother left the property to you. It was filed with the county. It's valid. So we're fine? She folded her hands on the desk. The document your brother presented, the one he said supersedes the will. I had a colleague take a look at it. And? The signature doesn't match your mother's signature on file with the county recorder. There are inconsistencies in the notary stamp as well. The date on the document falls inside the period when your mother was hospitalized. Records show she was in the ICU for 6 of the 8 days surrounding that date. I sat very still. Patricia said, I think you need to understand what I'm telling you. This document may be fraudulent. I had known on some level since the moment his wife wouldn't look at me. The way she'd stared at the floor while my brother talked. The way she'd held that envelope like it might catch fire. What do we do? I asked. We file to have the document examined. And if the examination confirms what we believe, your brother has committed fraud. We go to court, we present the evidence, and we let the judge decide. I nodded. File it. The courthouse in our county was built in the 1960s and smelled like recycled air and old carpet. I had been inside it once before, years ago, for a friend's hearing over a fender bender. I remember thinking how ordinary it looked for a place where people's lives got decided. I wore the gray dress I'd worn to my mother's funeral. It felt right somehow, not as a statement, just as a kind of continuity. I had been wearing it the last time something important was happening, and I needed to stay composed. Patricia was already there when I arrived, setting papers out on the plaintiff's table with the focused calm of someone who did this every week. My brother and his wife sat on the other side of the room with their attorney, a man in an expensive suit who looked like he charged by the syllable. My brother didn't look at me when I walked in, his wife did, for just a second. Then she looked away. The judge came in and everyone stood. I stood too, and when the room settled back into its seats, I kept my eyes forward. I did not expect what happened next. The judge sat down, opened the case file, and looked up to acknowledge the parties. His eyes moved from the defense table to ours. Standard procedure, the kind of glance that takes half a second. Except it didn't take half a second. Except it didn't take half a second. His gaze landed on me and stopped. He looked at me the way you look at something you recognize but can't immediately place, the mental reaching, the calibration. Then something clicked behind his eyes. The defense attorney was mid-sentence introducing himself when the judge held up one hand. The room went quiet. He leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me," he said, looking directly at me. Did you work at County General? In the trauma unit?" Patricia glanced at me. I kept my expression even. "Yes, Your Honor, for 3 years." The judge sat back. He pressed his lips together for a moment. Then he said, more to himself than to the room, "I thought so." The defense attorney cleared his throat. "Your Honor, if there's a prior relationship with the plaintiff, perhaps. I was a patient." The judge said flatly. "Ms. Okafor, counselor. I want that noted for the record. I treated this woman as one of my nurses 4 years ago following an emergency surgery. I am disclosing this now, fully and immediately." He looked at both tables. "If either party wishes to file a recusal motion, this is the time. You have 5 minutes to confer." Patricia leaned toward me. "Your call," she said quietly. "He's disclosing properly. That actually works in your favor. It shows transparency. But if you want a different judge, we can ask." I thought about it. I thought about the fact that he had disclosed it himself, immediately, without being asked. I thought about the fact that recusal would mean a delay of weeks, possibly months, and that my brother's attorney would almost certainly use that time to build a stronger case. "We proceed," I told her. My brother's attorney conferred with my brother for the full 5 minutes. Then he stood up and said they had no objection to continuing. I watched my brother's face when his attorney said it. Something moved behind his eyes that I couldn't entirely name. The examination of the disputed document had been completed by a forensic documents expert Patricia had retained. She was a small woman with silver hair and reading glasses. She pushed up and down her nose while she testified, and she was methodical in a way that was almost hypnotic. She explained the signature discrepancies, the pressure variations, the way the ink had been applied in a pattern inconsistent with my mother's documented signature across 11 other official documents spanning 15 years. She explained the notary stamp, how the embossing was shallow in a way that indicated it had been applied with a device different from the one registered to the notary whose name appeared on the document. She explained that the paper stock, when tested, was manufactured after the date printed at the top of the document. The paper was manufactured after the date the document claimed to have been signed. The defense attorney cross-examined her for 40 minutes. It didn't change anything she had said. Patricia called me to the stand. I answered every question she asked me. I talked about my mother's final months, about the appointments, the medications, the hospital stays, about the will, which had been drawn up 18 months before my mother's diagnosis, when she was healthy and clear-minded and had sat across from her own attorney and stated her wishes plainly. The defense attorney stood up to cross-examine me. "Ms. Carter," he said, "isn't it true that your mother expressed reservations to you personally about leaving the property solely to you?" "No." "She never mentioned feeling that the inheritance should be shared more equitably?" "She told me she wanted me to have the house because I was the one who would take care of it. Those were her exact words. But you have no documentation of that conversation." "It was a conversation between a mother and her daughter." He paused. "Miss Carter, you were working full-time during your mother's illness, correct?" "Yes." "Long shifts. Trauma nursing. High-stress environment." "Yes." "Is it possible that during that period you may have missed certain conversations your mother was having? With other family members, for instance?" I looked at him steadily. I was present for every medical appointment, every hospitalization, and every substantive decision made during my mother's illness. My brother visited 4 times. If my mother had a private conversation with him that changed her wishes about the most significant asset she owned, she would have told her attorney. There is no record that she did. There is no record that she did. There is no record that she did, because it never happened. The defense attorney looked at his notes. He had no further questions. We broke for lunch. I sat in the courthouse cafeteria with Patricia and ate half a sandwich and drank water that tasted like the building smelled. Patricia was making notes. I was watching the door. My brother came in with his wife. They sat 2 tables away. He ordered coffee. His wife ordered nothing. They sat across from each other and didn't speak. At one point she looked up and found me watching. She held my gaze for longer this time. There was something there that I couldn't categorize. Not guilt exactly, but something adjacent to it. Something exhausted. I looked away first. Afternoon session. The defense called my brother to the stand. He was composed. He had dressed carefully, dark blazer, careful tie, the presentation of a man who wanted to be taken seriously. He explained how he and my mother had spoken during one of his visits, how she had expressed to him that she was worried about leaving everything to me, how she had asked him to help her arrange the document. He said this with the practiced evenness of someone who had rehearsed it. Patricia cross-examined him. "Mr. Carter," she said, "you stated that this conversation with your mother took place during a visit in November. Is that correct?" "That's correct. Hospital records show your mother was admitted to the ICU on November 3rd and did not return home until November 11th. Which specific date in November did this conversation occur?" A pause. "I don't remember the exact date." "Was it before November 3rd?" "I believe so." "You believe so?" Can you tell the court which of your visits that would correspond to? Because hospital records and your mother's calendar, which we have entered into evidence, show your visits occurred on September 14th, October 2nd, November 19th, and December 28th. November 19th. Mr. 28th. Carter, was 8 days after your mother was discharged from the ICU, when her medical records indicate she was on a medication regimen that included 2 sedatives and a blood pressure drug with documented effects on cognition. My brother's attorney objected. The judge sustained part of it, overruled the rest. Patricia continued. Mr. Carter, who prepared the document we've been discussing today, my attorney, your current attorney, or a previous one? A longer pause. A previous attorney. Can you provide the name and contact information for that attorney? I don't have it with me. You don't have the contact information for the attorney who prepared a legal document you are now asking this court to recognize as valid. My brother straightened his tie, said nothing. Patricia let the silence run for a full 3 seconds. Then she said, no further questions. His wife took the stand in the late afternoon, when the light coming through the high courthouse windows had gone from white to gold. I hadn't known she would testify. My brother's attorney had added her to the witness list during the lunch break, and Patricia had leaned over and told me quietly that this was either a mistake or a last-ditch effort that had a chance of going very wrong for them. She sat in the witness box with her hands folded in her lap, and she looked smaller somehow than she did in real life. My brother's attorney asked her a few preliminary questions. She confirmed dates, confirmed a story about my mother's wishes, confirmed that she had been present for some conversations. Then Patricia stood up. She didn't say anything right away. She walked to the center of the room and stood there in a way that somehow compressed all the space. Mrs. Weinvern, Carter, she said. Before your husband retained his current attorney, before this case was filed, did you express any reservations to him about the document? A long pause. My brother's attorney was on his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Privilege. She is not the attorney, the judge said. She is the witness. I'll allow it. My sister-in-law looked at her hands. Mrs. Carter, Patricia said again, quieter. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want you to think carefully, because I have a phone record that shows a call from your cell phone to a legal aid hotline 6 weeks ago. A 12-minute call. So before you answer, did you express reservations to your husband about this document? The room was very still. My sister-in-law looked up. She didn't look at her husband. She didn't look at he. She looked at the judge. I told him we shouldn't do it, she said. Her voice was steady but thin, like a wire pulled tight. I told him the signature wasn't right. I told him it wasn't what his mother wanted. I said we needed to stop before it went this far. She stopped. Swallowed. He said it would be fine. He said she would just sign the paper and it would all be done. The room erupted in a low murmur that the judge silenced with his gavel. I sat at the plaintiff's table and breathed. My brother's attorney was conferring with my brother in urgent whispers. My brother's face had gone very still, the stillness of someone who understands that something has just become irreversible. Patricia turned back to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. The judge didn't take long. He had listened to all of it. The forensic expert, the records, my testimony, my brother's evasions, and finally, my sister-in-law's words, which had settled over the room like something final. He reviewed his notes for less than 20 minutes before he returned to the bench. He found in my favor. He upheld the original will. He voided the disputed document as fraudulent. He ordered a referral to the district attorney's office for review of potential criminal fraud charges because a judge is not there to decide criminal matters, but he is there to note when they appear to have occurred. He looked at my brother when he said that last part. My brother looked at the table. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon had gotten cold, that particular October cold that sneaks in while you're inside somewhere and surprises you when you step back out. Patricia was already on her phone. I stood on the steps and breathed the air and felt the strange flatness that comes after something long anticipated finally ends. Dana was waiting by the car. She'd taken the afternoon off and come to sit in the gallery, and when she saw me come through the doors, she crossed the sidewalk and hugged me before I could say anything. "Well," she said into my shoulder, "we won." She pulled back and looked at me. "All of it? All of it." She exhaled like she'd been holding it all day. I looked up at the building. I thought about my mother, who had sat across from her own attorney on a Tuesday in March, and said clearly, in the full possession of her mind and her wishes, that she wanted me to have the house. I thought about what it cost her to plan for the end of her life, what it cost her to do it carefully, to do it right, to try to make sure the people she loved would be taken care of. Someone had tried to undo that. Someone had had her blood and her last name. But she had done it right, and it held. I picked up my bag and walked down the steps toward the car. Behind me, I heard my brother's voice. My name, just once. The way he used to say it when we were kids and he needed something from me. I kept walking. The locksmith came that Saturday. I had the front lock rekeyed and added a deadbolt to the back door, not because I was afraid, but because some things need to be made official. The house was mine. The paperwork said so. The judge said so. And now the lock would say so too. I planted bulbs in the back garden that afternoon. The same kind of yellow tulips my mother used to grow along the fence, the ones she replanted every fall without fail, the ones I'd watched her tend every year of my childhood, without once thinking that one day I'd be the one doing it. The ground was cold and soft and smelled like rain that had already been absorbed. My phone buzzed, a text from my sister-in-law. No preamble, no explanation. "I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I'm sorry." I looked at it for a long time. Then I put my phone in my pocket and pressed the last bulb into the ground, and I covered it over, and I sat back on my heels and looked at the fence line where, in the spring, things would grow again. There's something I've come to understand about the way things play out. Not as luck, not as fate in any mystical sense, but as the simple, accumulated weight of choices. Every decision a person makes builds something, and eventually, whatever you've been building either holds you up or falls on top of you. My brother spent years making small choices, showing up 4 times in 8 months while I was changing her mother's IV lines, letting me carry the hard weight of her illness while he kept his distance. And then, when she was gone, deciding that her carefully written wishes were an obstacle rather than a truth to be honored. Each of those choices seemed, I imagine, like a small thing in the moment. Manageable, justifiable. But they stacked. And in that courtroom, they came due all at once. I didn't win because I was smarter than him. I won because I had spent years doing the actual work, the unglamorous, exhausting, and visible work of showing up. And work like that leaves evidence. It leaves records. It leaves a paper trail of appointments and hospital logs and a will that held up under scrutiny because the woman who signed it was clear-headed, present, and certain. My mother built her honesty into every document she touched. Long after she was gone, that honesty was still fighting for me. Rachel didn't walk into that courtroom looking for revenge. She walked in because something true needed to be defended. That distinction matters more than people realize. Anger is loud, but it burns fast. What carried her through was something quieter, the kind of steadiness that comes from knowing you are standing on solid ground. She had done nothing she needed to hide. That is not a small thing. In a room full of strategy and maneuvering and carefully prepared arguments, simply having nothing to hide is its own kind of power. There is also something worth saying about intelligence, not the kind measured in tests, but the kind that shows up as judgment, recognizing that you need an attorney before you sign anything, understanding that a document should be read before it's trusted, knowing when the right move is to slow down, not speed up. These are not dramatic gestures. They don't look impressive in the moment, but they are the difference between being protected and being exposed. And then there is the matter of character under pressure. The hardest part of what Rachel faced wasn't the legal process. It was sitting 2 tables away from someone she had once called family and understanding that she still had to conduct herself with integrity, not for his sake, but for her own. Because who you are in the difficult moments is who you actually are. The composed version of yourself that exists only when things are easy doesn't count for much. What I took from all of it is this: the truth is inconvenient to carry sometimes. It requires more effort than silence. It demands that you document things, that you show up, that you do the right thing even when no one is watching and no one will thank you for it. But it is also the only thing that holds. Everything built on something false eventually requires the false thing to be defended again and again until the cost becomes unbearable. Rachel's mother built her legacy on truth, and in the end, nothing could take it.